Also the yugas, of course. It was a big topic in this book, and in fact usually the only topic that people really at a first reading sort of gather or absorb, not necessarily the argument that Sri Yukteswar makes, but at least the fact that he says we're now in Dwapara Yuga. There was some mistake and this is what it is and when it was or something, but it's Dwapara Yuga. So just to recap briefly, we had to start late this evening because of the Living Wisely, Living Well broadcast that happened before this. And so I'm going to more or less just jump in to tonight's topic because we have a lot to cover. And also normally I would have liked to share a Swami Kriyananda talk, a video portion or excerpt with you as part of tonight, but I think we'll have to forego that. We certainly have had quite a few in recent weeks, and so we'll hopefully be back to a normal pattern next week, which will be our final class. So just to recap briefly, if you have been here for these classes, even if not, we began our first class with Chapter 1 of the Holy Science, again, the book that Babaji asked Sri Yukteswar Ji to write. Just an amazing thing that we're holding a book in our hands or in our minds, or hopefully you have the book already, or if not, you can order it at some point or get it here when such things are possible, that Babaji asked to be written. I mean, to touch something that was requested, its creation was requested, that was birthed by Babaji, makes us, helps, is just such a miracle. And then as Mary had pointed out after our first class or second class that studying this book, The Holy Science, is a way of feeling closer to Sri Yukteswar Ji also, which is a very good point. And Sri Yukteswar, as a Jnana Avatar, the title that Master gave him, we were studying this book also very close to his birthday, and we were thinking, what kind of birthday gift would Sri Yukteswar appreciate? What do you get a Jnana Avatar? Well, one thing is you could read his book. That seems like an appropriate puja or sort of offering to the Jnana Avatar, is to do something full of jnana. And first of all, in no way greater can you please an author than by reading the book. You know, it's funny sometimes how, anyway, people will talk about a book without actually reading it. And so in this case, of course, I don't blame anyone because it's a very challenging book. And as you may remember, Master said, even I, when reading that book, have to stop in places and think what it means. So if it makes an avatar think twice, then what hope do we have of actually understanding it? I venture that if you fully understand this book, as soon as you put it down, you'll go into samadhi. So until that happens, we maybe haven't grasped it fully, but we can grasp something. And Sri Yukteswar Ji said, I hope the people read and appreciate this book, those for whom it is intended, something like that. And it's not just the great, deep, wise ones who he intended this book for, who, of course, if they're wise enough, know these things already, but actually, I would say he also would intend it for anyone who wants sincerely to know. Remember, Babaji's request was, quote from the Indian scriptures or the Sanatana Dharma teachings, and also from the Bible, to show how these two religions are stating the same truth. So it wasn't just stating the truth, but showing it expressed in these two different religions, to bring people of the world together. That's the goal, the major goal, you could say, of this book. And so, Chapter 1 was the Gospel, was the title of it. And it was establishing, basically, the essential facts of the universe, that there is God, that we're all made out of God, what does he say? The only real substance is God. I just love it, thinking of God as the real substance. And so, basically setting the terminology, setting the definitions, setting how can we even have a conversation? We have to agree on certain basics, and that the goal of life is union. And that's in fact the title for the second chapter the goal. And this is essentially a summary of the Sankhya philosophy, the need for self-realization, that our goal in life is God. And that's really the only thing we should direct our efforts towards. He makes statements which I wish I had reread to refresh my memory of exactly how he puts it. But essentially, we said we can have the false notion of the lasting reality of this dream universe. He puts it much better than that. But basically, we get into trouble when we think that what's happening here is real. And we take it seriously, as if it has some inherent power, meaning, or truth in itself, which it does not. It only has meaning in how it helps us to learn our lessons. In that way, it has great meaning. Just as if you have a dream and then you awake from that dream having learned something or having a realization or a deep feeling of peace, you could say that dream really helped me. But otherwise, if you just had a dream that you were eating and then after you finished eating you ate some more, you woke up, unless you had a deep feeling of joy or peace from it, you could say, what was the point of that dream? It didn't have any meaning. It didn't have any use, except maybe I should, think twice about my next meal. Who knows? So that a lot of dreams don't have meaning, and if we're not careful, our lives can go in the same way. Not for you, obviously, on the spiritual path consciously, and I'm sure Divine Mother is helping everybody, but we could say that we will be helped a lot more if we live this life consciously, intentionally, with recognition of not what am I attaining, what am I gaining outwardly, but what am I becoming? Who am I becoming? And of course, ultimately, we want to become one with God. So now we took a break also in this sequence, and we went back to the introduction in one of our sessions together and covered the yugas. And that was quite a journey. So now we come to chapter 3, which is titled The Procedure. And if you can do the translation in your mind, if you haven't already, the procedure coming as after the goal, and if the goal was Sankhya, then the procedure must be yoga, the method, the way to get there. This is what the procedure is. So, diving right into it, this is the Sanskrit. He gives the Sanskrit slokas. If you have the book with you, this is page 35. So page 35, the beginning of chapter 3. But if not, I'll read it to you. Yajna, sacrifice, means penance, tapas or tapasya. Deep study, so penance, deep study, swadhyaya, and the practice of meditation on Om, Brahma Nidhana. Okay? So, yajna, which I don't know how we got to yajna, but we did. So we start with yajna, sacrifice means penance, deep study, the practice of meditation on Om. The slokas continue now. Penance, okay, so the first item, is patience, or even-mindedness in all conditions. Equanimity amidst the essential dualities of Maya, cold and heat, pain and pleasure, etc. And it's beautiful to see that word even-mindedness, because Master gave that phrase all the time, and Swamiji quoted Master saying, one must be even-minded and cheerful at all times. That is the way of the yogi. And here we have Swamiji quoting Master, quoting Sri Yukteswar. So it takes something that we hear all the time and brings us close to Sri Yukteswar Ji. So, number 2, the second item in that list, swadhyaya, consists of reading or hearing spiritual truth, pondering it, and forming a definite conception of it. So we see, several things are needed. First, we have to read or hear the truth, but we also have to ponder it. We have to think about it. We have to take it inside, not merely to exist in the same coordinates where spiritual truth is being uttered. And finally, forming a definite conception of it. So, hearing it, thinking about what we heard, and then understanding it rightly, you could say. And so this is, of course, not just something we do overnight or even over the course of a week, but something that we do regularly. In other words, we keep revisiting things and understand them on a deeper and deeper level. So in a certain way, it's like a spiral if we're going deeper. Think of it not spiraling downward, but spiraling deeper in our understanding, or spiraling upward, that we come back to the same point but at a different level. You see, back again, but again higher than I was before, and so on. So this is part of the process. The scripture continues, meditation on pranava, the divine sound of Om, is the only way to Brahman, spirit, salvation. So meditation on the divine sound of Om, pranava, is the only way to Brahman. And so I would say, keep that statement very clear in mind, that meditation on Om is the only way to Brahman, especially if you know the Om technique. So the next time you're thinking of practicing it, or it is the only way to Brahman. Now, patience, faith, and holy work explained. Okay, so now we begin the commentary. And if you're not sure, okay, this is a lot of words, where are we? Just remember there are 3 topics: penance, tapasya, deep study, swadhyaya, practice of meditation. Okay? So, tapas, or tapasya, is religious mortification, or patience. Okay, we prefer patience. Patience, both in enjoyments and in sufferings. Why does he mention religious mortification? Because we have to develop toughness. We have to develop strength. Swamiji said it's a good idea when dealing with an unpleasant situation to be in it a little bit longer than you might like, to be able to develop your power of endurance, titiksha. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to punish yourself or seek out horrible things, but if you find something is unpleasant, the physical pain, or some disagreeable situation, try to endure it even-mindedly a little bit longer, intentionally, you see. In other words, make a practice of it. That way, when something does come that you can't avoid and you can't make it stop, you will have practiced being patient, having that endurance. It doesn't just come like that necessarily. In some ways it does, but that's only if we're lucky. A lot of the rest of it is just hard work. As Swamiji said, a little pain never hurt anyone. So, patience both in enjoyments and in sufferings. Swadhyaya is shravana, study, with manana, deep attention, and thereby nidhi dhyasana, forming of an idea of the true faith about self. That is, what I am, whence I came, meaning from where did I come, where I shall go, what I have come for, and other such matters concerning self. Brahma Nidhana is the baptism or merging of self in the stream of the holy sound, pranava, Om, which is the holy work performed to attain salvation and the only way by which man can return to his divinity, the eternal Father, whence he has fallen. See Revelation, this is now from the Bible. I know thy works and charity and service and faith and thy patience, all these same concepts, and thy works, repeated again, and the last to be more than the first. I would like to explain this, but I would have to understand it better to be able to venture an explanation. Suffice it to say, it touches on the same concepts, and Sri Yukteswar is drawing a connection that I have only sort of barely grasped. Okay, now we have these wonderful, the next words. Now these are the next sutras now, slokas, sutras I mean. Om is heard, and why are we talking about Om? Because Om is the only way to Brahman. So Sri Yukteswar answers the question that should be in our minds. If listening to Om is the only way to Brahman, how do we hear it? And so he answers that. Om is heard through cultivation of Shraddha, the heart's natural love. Virya, moral courage. Smriti, memory of one's divinity. And samadhi, true concentration. Okay, so now he gives us, if you want to hear Om, which is the only way to God, if you want God, you need Om, and to get that, you need these 4 things. the heart's natural love, moral courage, memory of one's divinity, and true concentration. Now, have you ever heard of these things before on the spiritual path? At Ananda, for example? Of course. The heart's natural love, devotion, though the heart's natural love has another aspect to it, but still, devotion. Do we ever talk about devotion? Of course we do. Master put it forth as an essential on the spiritual path. Moral courage, which is essentially what I was talking about before a little bit in the Living Wisely, Living Well class, that we have to live dharmically. We have to live by the truth. We have to live in a moral way, and that takes courage. Why? Because, what will people think? What will they say? What will they do? What if this... Courage. And then smriti, memory of one's divinity. Isn't that a beautiful way to put it? It's not that we have to sort of discover divinity, it's that we have to remember. And Master would say that in one of his audio talks you may have heard. He says, you don't have to acquire, you have to remember. That's all. It's such a beautiful, it's so beautiful to hear him say that. And then concentration. Concentration, of course, we think of samadhi, at least I do, when I hear samadhi as oneness, as, the ultimate goal. And it is, but he also says concentration. We have to learn to concentrate. And of course, that's what we do all the time. The Hong Sa technique of concentration is the title Master gave it, not meditation, concentration. So we're doing all these things. So again, I say this to make this more familiar and translate it into our common language that we use here. But then we get to the next sutra is Shraddha is intensification of the heart's natural love. So basically, in a certain way, restating that. And I love it because he has given us, as the Jnana Avatar, he has given us all these wonderful Sanskrit words. Tapas, Swadhyaya, Shravana, Manana, Nidhi-dhyasana. That has to be the best one. And Brahmanidhana, Pranava, Manana. And then he says, heart's natural love. You see, just when the mind is bursting with all of these syllables, he says, heart's natural love. You see, and so it is so tempting for the ego to be pleased that it can grasp such complexity. And the only thing that is needed is love, says the Jnana Avatar, not the Prema Avatar. Sure, he's going to say it's all about love. The Jnana Avatar says love. Like Master said to that one person asking intellectual questions, love God. And so, you see, this is what we have to get. This is where you get the feeling and the vibration and the power of this book is with the heart, not with the mind. You can say, you can say, and you know what I'm going to say, you can say nidhi-dhyasana all you want. And it doesn't amount to anything if you don't say it with love. And if you don't even remember what it means, forming an idea of the true faith about self, even that one has to think a little bit about. So, forming an idea about the true faith about self, heart's natural love. Okay, there. Let's start there. That's not only the right wavelength, it's the only wavelength. How the holy sound manifests. This holy sound, pranava shabda, the shabda of course meaning word, manifests spontaneously through culture of Shraddha. And I say Shraddha, I know it's Shraddha, but some of these words I've heard so much with an American accent, if I'm not careful, I still say them that way. The energetic tendency of the heart's natural love. Virya, moral courage, he's basically telling us these again. Smriti, true conception, meaning it was memory of the divine nature, but he's also saying true conception. And samadhi, true concentration. Okay, the virtue of love. The heart's natural love is the principal requisite to attain a holy life. And so if you remember, whenever people talk about in Ananda, the holy science, we will often quote the statement, one cannot put one foot in front of the other on the spiritual path until he or she has developed the heart's natural love. You cannot put one foot in front of the other without the heart's natural love and developing that. Okay, so that's sort of the key, one of the key phrases. Holy science means yugas, Dwapara Yuga, okay, and it means the heart's natural love, without which one cannot put one foot in front of the other. Okay, so if you want to act like you got everything from this class, just say heart's natural love. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, I was there. You see, that's one thing you have to retain from this class. The heart's natural love is the principal requisite to attain a holy life. When this love, the heavenly gift of nature, appears in the heart, it removes all causes of excitation from the system and cools it down to a perfectly normal state. Such a beautiful thing. The heart's natural love is a heavenly gift of nature. You see? In other words, it's inherent, as I was saying in the other thing, if you happen to listen to that it's natural for people to tell the truth. You see, little children will do that. It's our nature to do that. In the same way, it's the heart's nature to love. So if the heart is not loving, that is a problem with it. It has deviated from its nature, perhaps with cause, again, perhaps because we've been hurt. But it is not the heart's nature to be that way. And so that's why we can think of this process of growing as healing. You see, returning to our true nature, returning to our proper state from some state that is different, altered. Do you see what I mean? As opposed to becoming perfect, more strong, infinite. No, you just have to return to what you are under normal circumstances, good circumstances, healthy circumstances. So, when this love appears in the heart, it removes all causes of excitation from the system and cools the system down to a perfectly normal state. And, invigorating the vital powers, expels all foreign matters, the germs of disease, by natural ways, perspiration and so forth. It thereby makes man perfectly healthy in body and mind, and enables him to understand properly the guidance of nature. Isn't that wonderful? Because, you see, people sometimes avoid developing the heart's natural love. In fact, science has made such a distorted view of science anyway, has made such a point, and there should be no feelings, no emotions, no prejudice, no leaning one way or another. And of course, on one level, that's true. We should do our experiments with an open mind to see what the truth is. But to eliminate all feeling is not only ridiculous, but impossible. Saying to a scientist, I eliminate all feeling. Why do you do science then? Well, because I like it. You see? Why do you study astronomy instead of geology? No, I prefer astronomy. You like it. Of course, the heart is involved in everything. And so there's not only no point in denying it, you can't deny it. But people, even on the spiritual path, will try to arrive at, for example, perfect health in body by doing all kinds of purifying diets, or by fasting, or by eating only such and such that came from the such and such, or having all kinds of just, I don't know, whatever, I don't want to comment on it. People can get so fanatical in their diets. Both Master commented on, don't do that. Swamiji said, I think one reason why people put so much emphasis on diet is it's a way to avoid having to develop devotion. You see, as Master said to Swamiji, that a pure heart is a better help than a pure stomach when Swamiji was fasting on grape juice. You see, it's much better to develop the heart, not just because it's useful spiritually, but Sri Yukteswar says, develop the heart and you will have a perfectly healthy body and mind. You see, all disease, it's a hard teaching, but all disease originates in the mind, Master said. That doesn't mean that if someone is sick, it's their fault for having wrong thoughts. That's a misapplication of that statement. But when we apply it to ourselves, what we can say is we should, in addition to whatever outer remedies we follow, work on the mind. And Swamiji also said, I don't care how many health practices you follow. If your mind is bogged down with chronic unhappiness, you will never be physically well. That is really what we have to work on. Do the other things, fine. Take pain relief, because it's hard to put yourself in a good mood with so much pain going on, fine. But when the pain is taken away, use that to address the root cause of unhappiness. Do the swadhyaya, the self-study, the introspection, and so on. And so it's so funny too, because people will fancy themselves intellectual, and I don't have time to develop the heart. You know, I'm not really a heart person. I'm more a mental person, a mind person. Everyone is a heart person, or they're just denying it. I say this as someone who had to work to develop this. It wasn't necessarily my nature, but it is our nature, Sri Yukteswarji tells us. So, if we develop the heart, and all these feelings, what do we get? When this love becomes developed in man, it makes him able to understand the real position of his own self as well as of others surrounding him. Just what the intellectual person wants, you see, is achieved through developing the heart's natural love. With the help of this developed love, now we come to the spiritual path, man becomes fortunate in gaining the godlike company of the divine personages and is saved forever. Isn't that beautiful? When you develop the heart, you get godlike company and you are saved. You see, from being in their company, you are saved. On one level, this is the teaching of satsang, being with other truth seekers, and how it's so important. And that's what we're having tonight. But also, of course, it's keeping the company of, the Guru. Without this love, without the heart's natural love, man cannot live in the natural way. Neither can he keep company with the fit person for his own welfare. He becomes often excited by foreign matters taken into his system through mistakes in understanding the guidance of nature, and in consequence he suffers in body and mind. He can never find any peace whatever, and his life becomes a burden. Hence, the culture, meaning the development of this love, the heavenly gift, is the principal requisite for the attainment of holy salvation. It is impossible for man to advance a step without, it is impossible for man to advance a step toward the same without it, meaning toward holy salvation, without this heart's natural love. And then he quotes from the Bible. Basically, God is saying to the devotee, I know thy works and thy labor, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. These are all good things, meaning you don't like to be around evil people. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles, and are not, and hast found them liars. In other words, you had good discrimination in not believing people who were telling falsehoods. And you have borne, and you have patience. I'm translating it into more familiar language. And for my name's sake you have labored, and you have not fainted. Excellent things. Very good. Congratulations. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. You see, in other words, if we do all these things without love, God still has something against us. Now, he doesn't really have something against us, but what he means is we have something against him. Yet we are holding back, yet he cannot come to us fully because we have done it without love. Or put it differently, when we do it with love, then he's totally open with us because we are open with him. But isn't it nice to have Sri Yukteswar's explanation first? Otherwise, you read this, you've done all these great things, but I have something against thee because thou hast left thy first love. Sort of like, you mean that person I met in college? It's like, you won't even necessarily know what's being talked about otherwise. So anyway, thank God the clarity comes first. Then once we know what to look for, we can make the connection. Okay, the next sutras. Because remember, first we had to have the heart's natural love. The second thing was moral courage, virya. Moral courage arises from Shraddha. It comes from developing the heart's natural love, directing one's love toward the Guru, and from affectionately following his instructions. There's that phrase again we love, affectionately following his instructions. Next sutra. Those who remove our troubles, dispel our doubts, and bestow peace are true teachers. They perform a godlike work. Their opposites, those who increase our doubts and difficulties, are harmful to us and should be avoided like poison. I would love to know the Sanskrit word for poison. And also the opposites of those who are harmful to us. This is something that Swamiji and Master said all the time. People with negative magnetism, people who draw our energy down, people who increase our doubts and difficulties should be avoided like poison. Now, some people you can't avoid like that, especially during lockdown, since you're not allowed to go out of the house, and anyway, you can fill in the blank there, the gap in that logic. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people we can avoid, and in fact, many people we can avoid sometimes. We don't have to be with them all the time. And even if we are with them a lot, our mind doesn't have to be with them. We can be sort of saying a japa, or we can be singing a chant, Door of My Heart, or something. We can have a secret, a love affair with God that no one has to know about. But we really should be selective as much as possible. And when people say, oh, no, but you don't understand, I can't, it only means they haven't tried. Because it's amazing how you can breathe space into a relationship that is toxic. You really can. You may not get all the space you want, but you can usually have more. There's that false notion that, no, but I have to. Because why? Because the person needs it, or because the person will get mad, or because I owe it to them, or all these things. Listen, be that as it may, you can still take some space. If only in the washroom, if only to say I'm going to take a nap, if only to the puja room, I'm saying prayers. I'm saying prayers for you. So then if you say that, then do say a prayer for them, and then spend the rest of the hour in meditation. Now, Sri Yukteswar comments, as explained in the previous chapter, this creation is substantially nothing but a mere idea play of nature on the only real substance, God, the Eternal Father, who is Guru, the Supreme in this universe. So now he's giving us that God really is Guru. All things of this creation are therefore no other substance than this Guru, meaning God, the Supreme Father, God Himself, perceived in plurality by the manifold aspects of the play of nature. See John so-and-so and the Psalm. Jesus answered them, saying, is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? Saying that that even we have a divine nature, that it and he continues, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. You see, that is our own nature too. Out of this creation, the object that relieves us of our miseries and doubts and administers peace to us, whether animate or inanimate, meaning this object, and however insignificant the same may be, is entitled to our utmost respect. Isn't that beautiful? The thing that heals us, the thing that helps us, that brings us peace, deserves our respect. Even if it be regarded by others as an object of vilest contempt, it should be accepted as Sat, Savior, and its company as godlike. Okay, that which saves you is the thing that you need to respect, no matter what other people say. That which produces opposite results, destroying our peace, throwing us into doubts, and creating our miseries, should be considered asat, the bane of all good, and should be avoided as such. Can you answer this? I think it's a courier. I'm sorry, the couriers, they feel badly about being left out of our classes, and so they call to join in. Hello? Sorry about that. The Indian sages have a saying, and this is now their saying. Some consider the deities to exist in water, natural elements, while the learned consider them to exist in heaven, the astral world. The unwise seek them in wood and stones, meaning in images or symbols. but the yogi realizes God in the sanctuary of his own self. Okay? So it's very interesting too, because it says some people, whoever, consider God to be in water, in nature. The learned, you see, meaning the educated, the intellectual, not the wise, not people who have grown from all their learning, but just the learning, consider God to exist in heaven, meaning the astral world. The unwise to exist in images or symbols, but the yogi realizes God in the sanctuary of his own self. Sri Yukteswar continues, to attain salvation, men choose as their savior the objects that they can comprehend, according to their own stage of evolution. Thus, in general, people think that illness is a dire calamity, and as water, when properly administered, tends to remove illness, ignorant men may choose for their divinity water itself. Isn't it interesting how he just makes an aside comment, water, when properly administered, tends to remove illness? It's amazing. I mean, haven't you heard that? Doesn't the doctor always say, drink plenty of fluids, when you're sick? I remember there was sort of a joke about this in some sort of science fiction show where this person had sort of been sort of half possessed by an alien, and the doctor said, I really don't know what to do, but drink plenty of fluids. And the person said, what? I've got this thing attached to me and you're saying drink plenty of fluids? And the doctor says everyone should drink plenty of fluids. So anyway, Sri Yukteswarji, casually, water tends to remove illness. It's amazing. So, he continues. Philosophers, being able to comprehend the internal electrical light that shines within them, find their heart's love flowing energetically toward the light that relieves them of all causes of excitation, cools down their system to a normal state, and invigorating their vital powers makes them perfectly healthy, both in body and in mind. They then accept this light as their divinity or savior. Ignorant people, in their blind faith, would accept a piece of wood or stone as their savior or divinity in the external creation, for which their heart's natural love will develop till, by its energetic tendency, it will relieve them of all exciting causes, cool their system down to a normal state, and invigorate their vital powers. You see, he's saying even if they're unwise and they're seeing this piece of wood or stone as divinity, if it develops their heart's natural love, the development of that love will still have all the same beneficial effects, cooling their system down and so forth. The adepts, on the other hand, having full control over the whole material world, find their divinity or savior in self and not outside in the external world. This is the next section, subheading, Regard the Guru with deep love. To keep company with the Guru is not only to be in his physical presence, as this is sometimes impossible, but mainly means to keep him in our hearts and to be one with him in principle and to attune ourselves with him. It's just so wonderful to hear Sri Yukteswarji say that. This thought has been expressed by Lord Bacon. A crowd is not a company. It is a mere gallery of faces. And this is a phrase Swamiji would quote too often. We can sometimes feel very lonely in a crowd. Sometimes we can feel lonely when we're alone and then say, I wish there were all these people around. Not right now unless they're wearing masks. But anyway, if they were, you could say it's not really a crowd of friends. It's just a mere gallery of faces. To keep company, therefore, with the godlike object is to associate him with Shraddha, the heart's natural love, intensified in the sense above explained, by keeping his appearance and attributes fully in mind, and by reflecting on the same and affectionately following his instructions lamb-like, like a lamb. Isn't that interesting? He goes on to the Bible. Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. Following his instructions lamb-like. Now, because a baby sheep, a little lamb, is thought to be a very sort of docile creature, a very sort of, surrendering, calm, innocent, and so on. Now, he doesn't mean lamb in the sense of being limp or just being sort of a passive baby that way, meaning a lamb is a baby. But not to be like that. It takes great strength to follow what the Guru says, especially when it's against our own sort of preference. I was going to say if it's against our nature, but it's not against our nature. It's not against our true nature. It's against our unnatural state. That's what he's trying to cure us of. I mean, just imagine if the doctor said, I need you to take these 2, pills. Why? I don't believe it. I don't want to take those pills. They don't taste nice. We'll take them with honey. Why should I have to take them at all? Just, okay, well, do you want me to call the mortuary right now and so we can arrange a burning for tomorrow at noon? You see, he's just trying to help us, just trying to save us. And the Guru is trying to save us from the fires that burn inside of us, the fires of discomfort. And it's so funny because those are the things we fight. How can you ask me to put water on the fire? Do you like burning? You see? And so that's what the lamb-like refers to be cooperative, to not resist the surgery, to not fight back against the good advice, to not, withdraw, but to with great strength, but with great lack of resistance to the Guru. There may be all kinds of resistance in a good way to other things, unhelpful things. We should avoid the poisonous things. In fact, Master said, if you can't develop willpower, develop won't power. It's wonderful. Instead of if you can't say, I do this, I can't do these good things, then put energy into avoiding other things. I won't do those things. But in any case, develop some kind of power. We have it within us all the time. We just have to act on it. By so doing, by all these things of cooperating with the Guru, being open to him, offering love to him, when man becomes able to conceive the sublime status of his divine brothers, he may be fortunate in remaining in their company and in securing help from any one of them whom he may choose as his spiritual preceptor, Satguru, the Savior. Thus, to resume, Virya or moral courage can be attained by the culture of Shraddha, the development of the heart's natural love. That is, by devoting one's natural love to his preceptor, by being always in his company, in the internal sense already explained, and by following with affection his holy instructions as they are freely and spontaneously given. You see, it's just the whole thing right there. If you have a guru, which almost all of you do. I haven't done a sort of audit to see who, but if you have a guru, as again you probably do, just do what he says. And do it affectionately, with gratitude, and lamb-like, without resistance, and be always in his company. How often do we miss Babaji, or do we miss Master? Oh, I wish I could have been with him. This funny thing is he's standing right next to us, and we're saying, oh, I miss Master. He's like, tap, tap, tap. No, don't bother me. I'm sad. I miss Master. Who do you think's tapping you? On the shoulder, you see? And so always keep his company. And this goes further, because even if we were in Master's presence, Swamiji said, even in physical company with Master, if people didn't have an inner relationship with him, the outer relationship did not count for much, according to Master. Put another way, some people doubt whether they really are his disciples or not. If only I could have been with him, if only he could have accepted me. From his own lips I could have heard those words, then I would know. Do you know that Swamiji said that in Master's lifetime, the disciples living with him, some of them expressed these same doubts. Am I really his disciple? Has he really accepted me? And so on. And isn't that amazing that having Master, which we would just love to have, and we sometimes, or at least I have thought, it would remove all doubt. They had him and yet they doubted. So it tells us that having his physical presence is not sufficient to overcome one's doubts. It has to be a presence inside. Why is that good news? Because you can have that now. The physical presence we can't have. Even Swamiji's physical presence we can't have. We can sort of simulate it by a video, by a recording of Swamiji, by a recording of Master. That's very good because it uplifts us. And it is the closest thing we can have, photos and so on. But still, Sri Yukteswar, even way back in the day, is writing of the truth that was just as true then as it is now. Keep the Guru's likeness before you and put your mind on him and invite him into yours. Okay, continuing. So, again, this is the study of yoga. And so we have begun with, yoga begins with the heart's natural love. Now, how do we even know that? I mean, where do we even know of yoga? Ah, yes, the Yoga Sutras. And Sri Yukteswar doesn't actually mention, here is this sloka or sutra from this source. He doesn't say which book it's from or which, source it's from. But what do we know of yoga? Well, Yoga Sutras, 1, now we come to the study of yoga. Okay, and that's what, as you may know from our Raja Yoga classes from Master's teachings, that Sri Yukteswar said that word now refers to the fact that, well, there was something before now. If now we come to the study of yoga, where were we or when were we? What were we doing before this? And Sri Yukteswar said that is a reference to the Sankhya philosophy. In Sri Yukteswar's book, that chapter 3 refers to chapter 2. I mean, an entire philosophy is just covered in one little chapter. No wonder it's hard to understand. So, I understand, I mean for us to understand. It's expressed very clearly, but it's still a little bit hard work. Now, second sutra, Patanjali, is Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Heart is the neutralization, Yoga is the neutralization of the chitta, of the vrittis of chitta, of the disturbed feelings. Yoga is attained when the disturbed feelings are calmed. And where are those disturbed feelings? In the heart. You see, so it makes sense that Sri Yukteswarji, in speaking of yoga, would begin with the heart's natural love, just as Patanjali does begin by saying, heart, calm those disturbed feelings in the heart. Swamiji said in his last book, he wrote, the entirety of the spiritual path consists in calming the emotions. And so now that we've covered that, now Sri Yukteswar, in speaking of yoga, like Patanjali speaking of yoga, Sri Yukteswar comes to the yamas and the niyamas. Still, we're dealing with moral courage. Remember, the heart's natural love was 1, then moral courage was 2. Moral courage is strengthened by observance. These are the sutras, I mean. Moral courage is strengthened by observance of yama, morality or self-control, and niyama, religious rules. Yama comprises non-injury to others, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, and non-covetousness, not desiring what belongs to other people. Niyama means purity of body and mind, contentment in all circumstances, and obedience, following the instructions of the Guru. And we say, but aren't there supposed to be 5? So what about Swadhyaya? Oh, that's right, he talked about Swadhyaya earlier. So he doesn't mention it here, perhaps. And what about devotion to the Supreme Lord? That's basically the entire book, and he did, in fact, mention devotion already. So why did he not repeat them there? I don't know here, but he certainly has covered those already. So the new ones are purity of body and mind, contentment in all circumstances, and obedience, following the instructions of the Guru, not necessarily of others. Firmness of moral courage can be attained by the culture of yama, the religious forbearances, abstention from cruelty, abstention from dishonesty, abstention from covetousness, unnatural living, and unnecessary possessions. and of niyama, the religious observances, purity in body and mind, cleaning the body externally and internally from all foreign matters, which, being fermented, create different sorts of diseases in the system, and clearing the mind from all prejudices and dogmas that make one narrow. Contentment in all circumstances, and obedience to the holy precepts of the divine personages. Now, Sri Yukteswar basically has something he really wants to say, and this is a perfect opportunity to say it. This is another one of those things you get out of the book, the yugas, the heart's natural love, and this next thing. What is natural living? To understand what natural living is, it will be necessary to distinguish it from what is unnatural. Living depends upon the selection of food, dwelling, and company. To live naturally, the lower animals can select these for themselves by the help of their instincts and the natural sentinels placed at the sensory entrances, the organs of sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. So in other words, animals have these 5 senses. They have the taste for the right things that they should do, and they act according to that taste and according to the sentinels, the guards, placed at their senses. With men in general, however, these organs are so much perverted by unnatural living from very infancy that little reliance can be placed on their judgments, on the senses, in other words. The senses are perverted, so don't believe their tastes and desires. To understand, therefore, what our natural needs are, we ought to depend on what? Depend on religion, depend on the scriptures, depend on what the wise have told us? No, he says we should depend on observation, experiment, and reason. You see, he makes it a fair conversation by saying, just look at the facts that he's going to lead us through, rather than saying, Indra has said that you should be vegetarian, and therefore, do you want to go against Indra? You know, he doesn't just quote somebody, even though if Indra said so, it would be because it's the truth, but he's saying to make it a fair, equal playing field, equal footing, let us observe, let us reason, let us experiment. So, subheading, what is the natural food for man? And this is again something he really has to deliver to us. First, to select our natural food, our observation should be directed to the formation of the organs that aid in digestion and nutrition, the teeth and digestive canal. So in other words, what do you eat? Well, let's look at the teeth, let's look at the digestive canal. To the natural tendency of the organs of sense, which guide animals to their food, and to the nourishment of the young, meaning what do the babies eat when they first start out eating? Okay, observation of the teeth. By observation of the teeth, we find that in carnivorous animals, the incisors, the vampire teeth, basically, the incisors are the front teeth. I'm sorry, I got it all wrong. Are little developed, but the canines, which are the vampire teeth, are of striking length, smooth and pointed to seize the prey. The molars are pointed. These points, however, do not meet, but fit closely side by side to separate the muscular fibers. Ah, yes. In the herbivorous animals, those that eat plants, the incisors are strikingly developed. The canines are stunted, though occasionally developed into weapons, as in elephants. The molars are broad-topped and furnished with enamel on the sides only. In the frugivorous, the fruit-eating animals, all the teeth are of nearly the same height. The canines are little projected, conical, and blunt, obviously not intended for seizing of prey, but for exertion of strength. The molars, the back teeth, are broad-topped and furnished at the top, not the sides, with enamel folds to prevent waste caused by their side motion, but not pointed for chewing flesh. Okay? So he's saying, not just this is the definition, he's saying, look at it. The next time you find a fruit-eating thing, say, excuse me, say ah. Go to a cow and check the cow's mouth out. Go to the tiger. Well, maybe don't go to the tiger, but look at their teeth. This is what you will observe. In omnivorous animals, those that eat meat and plants, such as bears, on the other hand, the incisors represent those of the herbivorous. The canines are like those of the carnivorous. They've got really long Dracula teeth, vampire teeth. And the molars are both pointed and broad-topped to serve a twofold purpose. Okay? So these are the four categories. Now the question. Now if we observe the formation of the teeth in man, we find that they do not resemble those of the carnivorous, neither do they resemble the teeth of the herbivorous or the omnivorous. They do resemble exactly those of the frugivorous animals. The reasonable inference, therefore, is that man is a frugivorous or fruit-eating animal. Okay? So, you might say, really? Only fruit? Can I make a fruit dosa or something like that? Well, there's two things. First of all, by fruit he includes other things, as you'll see in a moment. But also, even if ideally we should exist on fruit alone, I think Master said, or else it was Sri Yukteswar, it may be an autobiography of a yogi, said that in Dwapara Yuga, our sort of system isn't refined enough to be able to just live on fruit alone. And so we do need other plants, vegetables, and so on to sort of add to that. And so he didn't necessarily recommend a pure fruit diet only at this time. So in a few yugas you can have it. But for now we can have vegetarian. But fruit is the main thing, and why? He'll explain. Now, let us observe the digestive canal. By observation of the digestive canal, we find that the bowels of carnivorous animals are 3 to 5 times the length of their body, measuring from mouth to anus. And their stomach is almost spherical. Okay, so in carnivorous animals, the digestive tract is 3 to 5 times the length, which is meaning relatively short. For one reason, it's because there's a lot of toxins in their food and they have to get it out of their body as quickly as possible. The bowels of the herbivorous, the vegetable-eating animals, is 20 to 28 times the length of their body, and their stomach is more extended and of compound build. But the bowels of the frugivorous animals are 10 to 12 times the length of their body. Their stomach is somewhat broader than that of the carnivorous and has a continuation in the duodenum or duodenum. I've never quite gotten it right. How do you say that? It's like intestine or intestine. Serving the purpose of a second stomach. So, carnivorous 3 to 5 times, herbivorous 20 to 28 times. You wouldn't want to mix those up. If you've got toxic stuff, you don't want it to go 28 times around your body before leaving. And then frugivorous 10 to 12 times in the middle, meaning numerically in the middle. This is exactly the formation we find in human beings, though anatomy says that the human bowels are 3 to 5 times the length of man's body, making a mistake by measuring the body from the crown to the soles instead of from the mouth to the anus. Isn't it amazing? I mean, he's correcting everything. By the way, we're in the wrong yuga. The way we count the years is wrong. And saying the digestive tract is 3 to 5 times the length of the body is wrong because you can't measure from the head to the feet. If you're measuring an animal, for example, well, an animal like a tiger, another carnivorous, if you're saying 3 to 5 times, well, they all walk on 4 legs. And so you wouldn't even think of necessarily measuring their length of their body from the tips of their feet to the tops of their heads if you're just looking at their body, because, unless they're standing up on their feet, then it looks that way as we do. But it's not. You have to measure the outer length of the digestive tract compared to the inner length of the digestive tract. So the outer length of the digestive tract, as he said, is just mouth to anus. But internally, what inside what is going on, and how does that length compare to this length? You see? So it just makes perfect sense. it's understandable that people would get it wrong, because also we were going through Kali Yuga. So we're going to get things wrong anyway. And so he's here to fix it up, fix us up, clean it up. Thus we can again draw the inference, not only from the teeth, but also from the digestion, that man is in all probability a frugivorous animal. Okay. Third thing, because again, as I said, Sri Yukteswar really wants to make this case to us. Observation of organs of sense. By observation of the natural tendency of the organs of sense, the guideposts for determining what is nutritious, by which all animals are directed to their food, we find that when the carnivorous animal finds prey, he becomes so much delighted that his eyes begin to sparkle. Just think of it, the beautiful prey. He boldly seizes the prey and greedily laps the jetting blood. You see, already we're having a problem. Good for him. I don't know if that's going to be my dinner. You see, think about it. You see the dosa batter bag, and you see the perfect roast dosa on side. Hey. Or you see the little idlis arranged in the plate. Here comes the sambar. Especially if you haven't had any recently. Sorry. So you find immediately, I'm attracted to that. It's like, oh, look, and here is the dead animal with the blood still spraying. Vendama? On the contrary, the herbivorous animal refuses even his natural food, leaving it untouched if it is sprinkled with a little blood. I wouldn't recommend experimenting with this, but I believe him. His senses of smell and sight lead him to select grasses and other herbs for his food, which he tastes with delight. Similarly, with the frugivorous animals, we find that their senses always direct them to fruits of the trees and field. You know, it's interesting because birds, for example, are frugivorous, most of them, or many of them, and they eat fruit. And he's saying that they see the trees and the fruits in the field and so on. And birds see color the same way humans do. In other words, they see color, I believe, more or less in the same way. Whereas dogs, for example, are colorblind. They can't distinguish, reds and greens or whatever. Interestingly, that is what color blindness is, at least in men. That when men are colorblind, they see green and red. It's the same color, which makes driving through traffic lights a little interesting. You have to find another way to tell them apart. But it's funny with women when they have color blindness, they tend to not see blue and yellow differently. They see blue and yellow as the same. So again, why these colors? Even that is interesting in itself. How do they know that it's true, for example, in the case of women? Well, because, what did you do? I mean, if you're colorblind, you don't know you're colorblind. I mean, you can find different ways. No, it was just because there was a woman who came along who was colorblind in one eye. It's just fascinating how God says, it's time to learn about color blindness. And so here comes Betsy or, Shweta, and she's got one eye colorblind, the other eye normal, so she can tell you what's wrong. It's amazing. At least to me. In men of all races, we find that their senses of smell, sound, and sight never lead them to slaughter animals. On the contrary, they cannot bear even the sight of such killings. Slaughterhouses are always recommended to be removed far from the towns. Men often pass strict ordinances forbidding the uncovered transportation of flesh meats. Can flesh then be considered the natural food of man, when both his eyes and his nose are so much against it, unless deceived by flavors of spices, salt, and sugar? I mean, have you ever said, let me just have a raw whatever it is? No, I'll just eat it raw. It's not even considered safe to eat it raw in its uncooked state, but certainly not appetizing. On the other hand, how delightful do we find the fragrance of fruits, the very sight of which often makes the mouth water. It's really true, isn't it? You see like fresh, clean grapes and you're kind of, I would like to have some of those. Don't send me grapes right now, but thank you for thinking of it if you did. It may also be noticed that various grains and roots possess an agreeable odor and taste, though faint, even when unprepared. Thus, again, we are led to infer from these observations that man was intended to be a frugivorous animal. So here he includes the grains and the roots and the other things to be a part of that. Now, observation of the nourishment of the young. By observation of the nourishment of the young, we find that milk is undoubtedly the food of the newborn babe. Abundant milk is not supplied in the breasts of the mother if she does not take fruits, grains, and vegetables as her natural food. Cause of disease. Hence, from these observations, the only conclusion that can be reasonably drawn is that various grains, fruits, roots, and for beverage, milk, and pure water openly exposed to air and sun are decidedly the best natural food for man. You see, he's trying to make a logical case for it rather than just saying, you'll be more holy if you do this. These, being congenial to the system when taken according to the power of the digestive organs, well chewed and mixed with saliva are always easily assimilated. And Master made this point about well chewing and mixing with saliva because he said carbohydrates, starches, cereals, rice, all these things. He said they can only be digested in the mouth. The stomach has no capacity for digesting those. So he said you have to chew them well for them to dissolve and be digested, otherwise they won't. He said proteins are not at all digested in the mouth. It's good to chew them so that they're physically broken down for the stomach to do its work. But if you take a idli and swallow it whole, your stomach has a tough time. It's your mouth that's designed to chew these things. To digest these things. So something to keep in mind. I've sometimes wanted to go into more detail about that, but my wife has encouraged me not to. Some people get a little grossed out by it. Other foods are unnatural to man, and being uncongenial to the system are necessarily foreign to it. When they enter the stomach, they are not properly assimilated. Mixed with blood, with the blood, meaning one's own blood, they accumulate in the excretory and other organs not properly adapted to them. When they cannot find their way out, they subside in tissue crevices by the laws of gravitation, and, being fermented, produce diseases, mental and physical, and ultimately lead to premature death. Children's development. Experiment also proves that the non-irritant diet natural to the vegetarian is, almost without exception, admirably suited to children's development, both physical and mental. Their minds, understanding, will, the principal faculties, temper, and general disposition are also properly developed. Next heading, natural living calms passions. We find that when extraordinary means, such as excessive fasting, scourging, which is sort of beating yourself, and monastic confinement are resorted to for the purpose of suppressing the sexual passions, these means seldom produce the desired effect. Experiment shows, however, that man can easily overcome these passions, the arch enemy of morality, by natural living on a non-irritant diet. Isn't it amazing? He said, look, just comes down to diet. Above referred to. Thereby, men gain a calmness of mind, which every psychologist knows is the most favorable to mental activity and to a clear understanding, as well as a judicial way of thinking. Next heading, sexual desire. Sri Yukteswar essentially says, while we're on the subject, something more should be said here about the natural instinct of propagation, which is, next to the instinct of self-preservation, the strongest in the animal body. Sexual desire, like all other desires, has a normal and an abnormal or diseased state, the latter resulting only from the foreign matter accumulated by unnatural living as mentioned above. As he says in Autobiography of a Yogi, just from wrong diet it produces irritation in the nerves, which then leads to this desire. In the sexual desire, everyone has a very accurate thermometer to indicate the condition of his health, meaning the two are correlated. The desire is forced from its normal state by the irritation of nerves that results from the pressure of foreign matter accumulated in the system. Oh, I guess he says it here. Which pressure, which pressure is exerted on the sexual apparatus and is at first manifested by an increased sexual desire, followed by a gradual decrease of potency. This sexual desire in its normal state makes man quite free, meaning when things are normal, makes man quite free from all disturbing lusts and operates on the organism, awakening a wish for appeasement only infrequently. Here again, experiment shows that this desire, like all other desires, is always normal in individuals who lead a natural life, as mentioned. So again, it's the good news. It's like work on the diet, work on meditation, work on cooling the system. It will help. The root of the tree of life. The sexual organ, the junction of important nerve extremities, particularly of the sympathetic and spinal nerves, the principal nerves of the abdomen, which, through their connection with the brain, are capable of enlivening the whole system, is, in a sense, the root of the tree of life. Man, well instructed in the proper use of sex, can keep his body and mind in proper health and can live a pleasant life throughout. The practical principles of sexual health are not taught because the public regards the subject as unclean and indecent. It's sort of like, look, it's the thing that so many people struggle with and nothing can ever be said on the subject. Thus blinded, mankind presumes to clothe nature in a veil because she seems to them impure, forgetting that she is always clean, and that everything impure and improper lies in man's ideas, not in nature herself. It is clear, therefore, that man, not knowing the truth about the dangers of misuse of the sexual power and being compelled to wrong practices by the nervous irritation resulting from unnatural living, suffers troublesome diseases in life and ultimately becomes a victim of premature death. Again, wanting to emphasize, what is the cost? Premature death. He's really driving the point home. The dwelling place of man. Now, moving on. We talked about the food. Next is dwelling. Third is company. So now dwelling. Secondly, about our dwelling place. We can easily understand when we feel displeasure on entering a crowded room after breathing fresh air on a mountaintop or in an expanse of field or garden that the atmosphere of the town or any crowded place is quite an unnatural dwelling place. The fresh atmosphere of the mountaintop or of the field or garden or of a dry place under trees covering a large plot of land and freely ventilated with fresh air is the proper dwelling place for man according to nature. We can't go out right now much, but it's just so true. Whenever we go out in nature, whenever I do, living here in the city as I do, you don't even realize, I don't even realize how much I miss nature until I'm back in it. Just, I feel such a part of the planet. It feels so proper. I can't say when I return to the city I feel, though I know many people who do say that when they grew up in nature, actually I did too, but that they just miss they feel pain in being separated from it. I think that makes sense actually, but in fact that's what Sri Yukteswarji is saying. But being back in nature in a positive way, it gives such a strength and a power. We think, what was I even living before? So anyway, something to keep in mind. If you can't be in it right now, at least you can look at pictures of it. You can in some way try to connect to it. Many of the people who went on the pilgrimage to Ananda village with us were saying, you never get to be in nature. Ramesh was taking a shower in the outdoor shower. He said, you look up and you see sky, leaves, it was just such a nice experience to have. Next, the company we should keep. You see, okay, so food, dwelling, company. Dwelling is a paragraph. The company we keep is a paragraph, but food gives us this long thing because he's trying to correct our misunderstanding. Thirdly, as to the company we should keep. Here also, if we listen to the dictates of our conscience and consult our natural liking, we will at once find that we favor those persons whose magnetism affects us harmoniously, who cool our system internally, invigorate our vitality, develop our natural love, and thus relieve us of our miseries and administer peace to us. Who wouldn't want to be around such people? The problem is finding them. Luckily, for most of you, that problem has been solved. This is to say, we should be in the company of the Sat, or Savior, and should avoid that of the Asat, as described above. By keeping the company of the Sat, the Savior, we are enabled to enjoy perfect health, physical and mental, and our life is prolonged. If, on the other hand, we disobey the warning of Mother Nature without listening to the dictates of our pure conscience, and keep the company of whatever has been designated as Asat, the opposite effect is produced, and our health is impaired, and our life shortened, meaning premature death. Necessity of natural living and purity. Thus, living naturally is helpful for the practice of yama, the ascetic forbearances as explained earlier. Purity of mind and body being equally important in the practice of niyama, the ascetic observances already explained, every attempt should be made to attain that purity. Okay? So we've covered the yamas and the niyamas. I had wanted to go further, and I'm going to go just a little further, but I can't go as far as I wanted. And the only thing that concerns me is we're not going to finish this chapter tonight. There was never a hope of that, but I was hoping to do 2/3 of it tonight, and then next week to do the last of it as well as Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is relatively short. But anyway, I can't bludgeon you with these things either, so I think I'll just do this next section and we'll pause it there for tonight then. Okay, so we've covered what? Yama, niyama. So what comes next? Well, you know in Ashtanga Yoga, in the Eightfold Path, what comes next, right? And so let's see if you're right. Sri Yukteswarji will tell us. In following yama and niyama, he says, hence, bondage disappears. Excellent. The 8 bondages or snares are hatred, shame, fear, grief, condemnation, race prejudice, pride of family, and smugness. Okay, well, we're going to go a little deeper into those. Removal of the 8 bondages leads to magnanimity of heart, largeness of heart, good-hearted, generous spirit. Thus, one becomes fit to practice asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. That's what you were thinking, right? After yama and niyama. And to enjoy the householder's life by fulfilling all one's desires and so getting rid of them. Asana means a steady and pleasant posture of the body. Pranayama means control over prana, life force. Pratyahara means withdrawal of the senses from external objects. Okay, so the pranayama, pratyahara, asana part was probably familiar to you, and it's sort of like, okay, good, yeah, we got this. But what about the first part, the 8 bondages or snares? The famous subtitle now comes. Remember, when everyone talks about the holy science, you can say yugas, you can say the thing about the fruit-eating animals, and, the irritated nerves in the system, but basically fruit, look at the teeth. You can say heart's natural love, and you can say the 8 meannesses of the heart. How many meannesses of the heart? Because often we'll talk about overcoming the meannesses of the heart. There are 8. Why are there 8? Well, look, isn't 8 enough? I mean, gee. Also remember the 8 aspects of God, so the 8 meannesses of the heart and so on. So he just says this only just in this one paragraph, but it's so important. Firmness of moral courage, virya, when attained, removes all the obstacles in the way of salvation. These obstacles are of 8 sorts. Hatred, which he says in both cases, in the scripture and in his explanation. So we should not feel hatred. Usually hatred comes from anger. I think. And so, in other words, you may not relate to hatred so much. If you say, I hate them, it probably just means I'm really angry at them. I don't like them, but I don't like them because I'm angry. And remember, we only are angry because we didn't like what happened. It all comes from desire blocked. That makes us angry. Okay, hatred. Shame. Isn't that interesting that shame should be a meanness of the heart? By the way, what does meanness mean? It doesn't mean only sort of being unkind or cruel, the unkindnesses of the heart. It also means mean, meaning small, to shrink, the narrowness of the heart, the things that shrink the heart. Shame is no good. We could say, well, what's wrong with feeling shame? That's when I feel badly about myself. No, it's not right. It's an over-exaggeration of how bad we are. Sometimes people have competition to see who is the worst person, or who had the worst day, or who has the worst, more painful disease. It's not a contest you want to win. And there's no point in trying to beat out the competition in this negative way. You see? So why feel shame? Also, the other thing about shame is it tends to be paralyzing, and so we don't do anything to improve the situation. Okay. Next, hatred, shame, fear. He lists in both. Fear, again, why be afraid? You have God with you. And so anyway, when we are afraid, it's not so easily overcome. But remember, fear is to be overcome. You can see the same situation without being afraid of it, meaning it's possible. So work on that fear so that you can see the situation more clearly. Grief, that's an interesting one because grief on one level is an important step in emotional healing, to acknowledge that yes, I am sad, does help us. So I don't think he means don't ever have grief, but don't have prolonged grief. Don't hang on to something for, once we've held on to a sad thing that happened to us for 10 years, that's probably enough. We can let it go. We should learn to let it go because that grief is an anchor that just hangs on our heart. It's interesting, Swamiji made the comment that, at least in America, perhaps in India too, that so many children have trouble with their parents, meaning emotional hurts. That you might find people who are grown up and said, yes, but my parents were unkind in this way. And they spend a lot of time working on letting go of this grief, letting go of this hurt. He said, basically, till about the end of their lives, they finally work it out with their parents, just in time to die and be reborn to new parents. It's just like, look, whatever hand we got dealt, if you had great parents, I'm so happy for you. But let's just get it over with. Let's heal now and go to the real parents rather than just looping again and again and again. And you didn't do this, and I had this problem. And it all may be true. I don't mean to just pretend it didn't happen. Find the hurt, but the hurt is in us. As Master said, better to die once than to die every day. Talking all about these terrible things. Don't relive it. Try to heal it. Try to understand. It's not easy, especially if it happened when you were a young child. Young children don't have words. They don't have means to defend themselves. They don't have freedom. Being a young child can be a lot like being in jail. And sometimes it is that way. If you died in jail, you're reborn in sort of a family jail to live out the rest of your sentence. And then you can get free. And once free, be free. Okay, condemnation. So when we condemn something that this is wrong and stand in judgment of it, it's a meanness of the heart. So Master says, don't judge others. And he said, if you judge anyone as being wrong, as being evil, and so forth, he said, you will have to live out those same circumstances in a future life, the same circumstances of the people of whom you disapproved of so uncharitably. Meaning, don't be lacking in charity. Be charitable. Listen, who knows what situation they're dealing with. If nothing else, we can say either, it's none of my business, or we can say, there but for the grace of God go I. Meaning, who knows if I in the same situation would not have behaved in the same way. We would see this sometimes if encountering somebody who behaved rudely and so on. And I would think, sometimes my first thought would be, how can they treat me this way? Or how can they act that way, even if it's not to do with me? And then I realized, well, who has trained them? Swamiji would not let us behave that way. It's not that he would criticize us, but we wouldn't even want to behave that way following his example. Could I claim that I would have learned to behave in a better way had I not had his training, his example, as we all have? I don't know, I might be just the same. Shri Krishna says, as the greater man does, the lesser men imitate. And so if the boss is acting like a jerk, people will probably start acting like jerks. And if the leader acts like a nice person, probably that will have an effect on the people and help them. The leader, the teacher, the parent, whoever is, there guiding the others, either directly or indirectly. So keep keep that thought in mind on both sides of the equation for you. Okay. Hatred, shame, fear, grief, condemnation, don't be condemning, race prejudice. So that's very interesting too. Pride of pedigree, that's the most famous of all the 8 meannesses of the heart, because the other ones were kind of we don't want that, but pride of pedigree. Because I come from such and such a family, therefore. Because I come from such and such a caste. Because I come from such and such a university. You see, someone was telling me that because I went to some fancy college and there were people from all over the world who were my classmates, they said, it's so nice that there's no prejudice there. I said, there's total prejudice. It's just against people who are less intelligent. You see, there's no prejudice against countries, but it's see how excellent we are, and look at that person, they only go to that college. It's the same kind of prejudice, it's just pride of pedigree. Any line that we draw and say the people on this line are okay and the people on that line are not okay is wrong. It is a meanness of the heart. Anything, base it on religion, base it on country, base it on political party, base it on, gender. Any way that you can say this class and that class, it's wrong. And so who cares about the world? Just look for it in ourselves. I've had that challenged in myself sometimes. I will grow up thinking that, I don't know if that's such a good thing to do. And just say, well, again, if we are separating, what is the Sanskrit word for that which separates? Maya. So let's look for in ourselves, if we have a reaction to pride, because after all I am such and such, that's a meanness of the heart. Let's work on healing that. Why do I have to be better? You're already a child of God. That's as best there is. So is that person. And they have a chair at the table, and you have a chair at the table, and nobody can sit in your chair. There's no turf to fight over. Everybody gets the same number of vada. The last one, a narrow sense of respectability, which he called smugness. You see, it's sort of related to pride of pedigree in one way, but that's where I'm born from, but sort of this way, the way we do things, it's sort of this person did it with their left hand, not their right hand. This kind of thing. A narrow sense of respectability. The thing about eating with the right hand and also receiving gifts with the right hand actually has a bit of a spiritual and a yogic background to it. But to judge someone for breaking the rules does not have a yogic justification, as you've just heard. Okay, moving on. Awakening the magnanimity of the heart. By the removal of these 8 obstacles, viratvam or mahatvam, magnanimity of the heart, largeness, being large-hearted, comes in. And this makes man fit for the practice of asana, remaining in steady and pleasant posture. It's sort of no, wait a minute, why do we have to behave well and have a large heart to be able to sit still? Because one of the chief reason we can't sit still is because the mind and the heart are agitated. It's not the muscles, it's the mental tension leads to physical tension, you see? So having large-heartedness leads to asana, now also to pranayama, control over prana, involuntary nerve electricities, and pratyahara, changing the direction of the voluntary nerve currents inward. You see, first pranayama, you control the energy, and then pratyahara, with this control, you now can direct the energy. Just to control the energy is not enough. It's fine to say, now I have control. Now what do I do? You see, I can direct the energy. Enge, where should you direct it? That's what pratyahara is. These practices enable man to satisfy his heart by enjoying the objects of senses as intended for grahastha ashrama, domestic life. Okay, we're almost done. Hang in there a little bit, those of you who can. Those of you who can't, please feel free to leave as you need to, and the recording will be available. The value of pratyama. The value of pranayama is what I meant to say. Man can put the voluntary nerves into action whenever he likes and can give them rest when fatigued. When all of these voluntary nerves require rest, he sleeps naturally, and by this sleep the voluntary nerves, being refreshed, can work again with full vigor. Good. Okay, great. Man's involuntary nerves, however, irrespective of his will, are working continuously of themselves from his birth. Yeah, involuntary. Yeah, it's true. As he has no control over them, he cannot interfere with their action in the least. Yeah, I mean, that's involuntary, means you can't control them. When these nerves become fatigued, like the voluntary nerves become fatigued, they also want rest and naturally fall asleep. Okay. This sleep of the involuntary nerves is called Mahanidra, the great sleep or death. Wait, what? See, when the involuntary nerves want to rest, game over. I hope that's not how you're feeling right now. Anything for a break from this. I know it's a lot to take in. When this takes place, the circulation, respiration, and other vital functions being stopped, the material body naturally begins to decay. After a while, when this great sleep, Mahanidra, is over, the great sleep, you remember you awake from sleep, and so even from Mahanidra, you wake up from. Man awakes with all his desires and is reborn in a new physical body for the accomplishment of his various yearnings. In this way, man binds himself to life and death and fails to achieve final salvation. Just imagine if every night when you went to sleep you woke up in a new body. That would be kind of weird, wouldn't it? I mean, let's just assume it's the same age, and maybe even the same gender, but then otherwise it's a different body. That would be weird, but that's what we do after the Mahanidra. And so, meaning it's just as weird compared to who we really are as this would be if it happened every night. Control over death is the subheading. But if man can control these involuntary nerves, meaning one option is death, there's another option. By the aforesaid pranayama, he can stop the natural decay of the material body and put the involuntary nerves of the heart, lungs, and other vital organs to rest periodically, as he does with his voluntary nerves in sleep. After such rest by pranayama, pranayama, the involuntary nerves become refreshed and work with newly replenished life. As after sleep, when rest has been taken by the voluntary nerves, man requires no help to awaken naturally, so after death also, when man has enjoyed a full rest, he awakens naturally to life in a new body on earth. If man can die, that is, consciously put his entire nervous system, voluntary and involuntary, to rest each day by practice of pranayama, his whole physical system works with great vigor. Life and death come under the control of the yogi who perseveres in the practice of pranayama. In that way he saves his body from premature decay that overtakes most men, and can remain as long as he wishes in his present physical form, as long as he wishes. Thus having time to work out his karma in one body, and to fulfill, and so get rid of, all the various desires of his heart. So remember, when you want to meditate, or especially when you don't feel like meditating, a little pranayama will prolong your life. It will give your involuntary nerves a little sleep. It's like putting off sleep. How many days a week do you put off sleep? Meaning don't have any at all. Probably none. Once in a great while you might stay up for 36 or 48 hours, but beyond that, we know I got to sleep. So in meditation, your involuntary nerves are crying out, please give us some sleep also. That's another reason why we feel so good after meditation. Because the nerves got a rest. Finally purified, he is no longer required to come again into this world under the influence of Maya, when we've gotten rid of all our desires. Darkness, Maya means darkness, or to suffer the second death. So if we purify ourselves, we no longer have to overcome the second death. So what does this mean? I protest by our rejoicing which I have in Christ consciousness. I die daily. This is from the Bible. St. Paul said, I die every day. And this is often referred to by yogis as the phrase where he's pointing that the outer body appears through death, appears as though dead because of meditation, because of pranayama, life control. Another quote from the Bible, Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. You see, because he's saying, look, you should be dying all the time in meditation, and then if you do that enough, you won't have to die physically. Not meaning ever, the physical body may die, but really you won't have to be born again. That's really what it is. So it's kind of funny, because we talk about being born a second time means to be born of spirit. But to die a second time is referring to the physical death. In other words, the first birth is physical, the second birth is spiritual, twice born. Whereas in this case, the first death is spiritual and the second death is physical. The necessity of Pratyahara, almost done. Man enjoys a thing when he so desires. At the time of the enjoyment, however, he directs his organs of sense through which he enjoys toward the object of his desire. At the time of the enjoyment, however, if he directs his organs of sense through which he enjoys toward the object of his desire, he can never be satisfied. And his desires increase in double force. On the contrary, if he can direct his organs of sense inward toward his self, at that time he can satisfy his heart immediately. So, the practice of the aforesaid pratyahara, the changing of the direction of the voluntary nerve currents inward, is a desirable way to fulfill his worldly desires. Man must reincarnate again and again until his earthly longings are worked out and he is free from all desires. Finally, the necessity of asana. Man cannot feel or even think properly when his mind is not in a pleasant state, and the different parts of the human body are so harmoniously arranged that if even any minutest part of it might be hurt a little, the whole system becomes disturbed. Isn't it true? You have one little tiny, ow, I hurt my finger, ha, ha. It's like you can't even do anything like, 200th of ourself in terms of square inches is affected. But as Sri Yukteswar said, the body is so harmoniously arranged that even a little disharmony takes over everything. So, to comprehend a thing, that is, to feel a thing by the heart clearly, the practice of the aforesaid asana, the steady and pleasant posture, is necessary. We have to be physically centered so that we can become mentally centered, so that our heart can feel. If we're not physically sitting in a good way or whatever, we'll feel physical pain or discomfort. And so therefore there's no chance of the heart knowing what emotions and feelings it has. So first calm and soothe the body. Then if you don't feel comfortable, you know that, okay, something must be wrong with my heart. But, if the body's pain, physical pain is there, it overshadows any emotions that we might be feeling. It distracts us from the deeper feelings, in other words. Okay, so We didn't even get as far as I would like, and yet we came far. So I wanted to know if you had any comments. We'll turn the speaker on here if you'd like to say anything, any comments or questions. I'm happy to take questions. I love comments. So, thank you for firing up your cameras. Those who are still here. Gosh, so nice to see you all. Wow. And others, if you can jump in on your cameras too, that would be nice. Those of you who survived to the end. So, okay, yes. Ritu, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, good evening, Dharmarajan.
Good evening.
Very nice class again. You've explained everything very well, and of course, after once, we hear from you, and then when we go and read the book, we are able to understand more. It's
Good,
better.
good. That's
Yeah.
my hope.
Now, I wanted to know. You spoke about voluntary and involuntary nerves. Now, what are these involuntary nerves? Like,
The heartbeat, the lungs pumping, all those processes that you don't control. You know, you've heard your mother might have said, be sure to chew your food, but then she doesn't say, be sure to digest your food. We don't have to go to get the stomach to squeeze the food. It just happens. So anything in the body that just happens without your control.
oh, okay, I got it. Thank you, Dharmarajan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Purni. So amazing. I didn't see you. I just hear this voice sailing out of the ether. Please.
Thank you. Gee, this one of these features which are important for the development of magnanimity of the heart is shamefulness. As human beings,
Shamelessness.
sorry,
Shamelessness.
yes, that is feeling ashamed. Am I
Feeling,
right?
feeling unashamed. Meannesses. Yeah, the thing to avoid. Shame is bad. Shame, Vaindam. That's what he's saying. Do not feel shame.
Okay, right. So, as human beings, we tend to do mistakes knowingly, unknowingly, and sometimes because of a lack of a state of responsibility. But at a later time, we always realize that it is a mistake, and by the time, sometimes it's blown out of proportion, either by the society or by the people or by our own mind. And often, when you think of it at a later time, oh my God, I needed to have done that. Oh my God, and is that what should not be done? Does he say that it is
I
bad?
don't know. I mean, that's not necessarily shame. I mean,
Correct.
that might be regret or sort of the momentary horror. But, really what it is shame, I made a mistake is different from saying I'm a bad person. Shame leads us to judge it, to say how horrible we are because we did that thing. We made a mistake.
Okay.
So, and if it really is a mistake, then, and not just our perception, sometimes we could say, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to that person. They must be shattered. And the person doesn't even remember. Because we're so thinking about, I'm so sorry I did that, because we're thinking about ourselves. And the person said, don't worry, I'm thinking about myself. I don't even remember what you said. I wasn't even listening, which isn't great. But the point is, you see, we should not condemn. Condemnation was another one. Shame is self-condemnation. We should not feel that, and we should not allow anyone to try to make us feel that. And that happens a lot too sometimes. Unfortunately, it happens a lot here. Not here, Chennai, but here, India, where people will say, this happened to your child because of some sin you committed. Horrible thing to say. And so that is that kind of thing we should that's one of those poisons to be avoided. A little bit of honey, a little bit of turmeric. Why don't we mute everybody except Porni? So don't have shame, instead have a little bit of honey and a little bit of turmeric. Yeah. Okay? It's okay to feel regret. It's okay to feel, oh, I shouldn't have. But the point is to then act better in the future, not to just heap blame upon ourselves. No, I said mute everybody except her. Sorry. Please. Oh, well, I just meant manually. But yeah, that's okay. Okay.
Okay, I want to ask a question.
Wait. Wonderful. Just let Purni finish.
No, I'm done. I'm
Okay,
done.
Purni has finished.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Ji,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Shobha.
I want to know meditation and your pranayama is safe?
Safe or same?
Same?
Same. No. Yes and no. It's hard. I mean, it's sort of like depending on how you picture it. On this path, yes, most of the meditation techniques we practice, if not all, are pranayama techniques. But meditation includes preparation, the actual practice of the technique, and then the silence. The real word meditation, in terms of this, becoming, this listening for God's answer, this absorption, is really what happens in the silence time. Pranayama, following a meditation technique, is not strictly speaking meditation. It is a technique, for example, of concentration that helps us in meditation. But the problem is with that, some people feel so distracted in the silence, whereas they feel good during the practice of the technique. To say, yeah, but that's not really meditation, isn't very encouraging. So we tend not to split hairs over it. So the answer is yes and no, both and. You can meditate without a technique being strictly a pranayama technique, but our path is one of pranayama, energization. Pranayama, obviously, what's it called? Energization, exercises, control of the energy. Hong Sa is a pranayama technique in that you control the energy through observation of the breath. It is not a pranayama translated as breath control technique, because you don't control the breath in Hong Sa, but you do control your energy. And so it's definitely a pranayama. Om technique, yes. And the Kriya Yoga pranayama is a pranayama. It's a name, in fact. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good question. Aprama? Anyone? Vani, please, just jump in. Oh, except after...
Thank you, Ji, for the nice lecture.
Thank you for your messages that you've been sending also. Sorry?
We missed you last week.
I missed you too.
Then this directing our desires towards the self, that seems to be a very good technique. Towards the self means what? We offer it to our greater self, God.
Well, if you're referring to this last phrase, what we just covered at the end in terms of the phrase, in terms of this direction, yes, it is God, just like you said. So, in other words, it says, when enjoying something, direct the organs of sense inwardly towards ourselves. What Master said was, enjoy everything with God. In other words, if you have some tasty food, just say, oh, how wonderful, Divine Mother, thank you for making this for me, even if you made it yourself. Did you grow the rice yourself in your backyard? And even if you did, how did it grow? We don't make the plants grow. We set it up, but then they magically grow. So thanking Divine Mother, enjoying it, saying, oh, if you've had a good meditation, then later if you have some nice cup of tea, you can say, this reminds me of the joy of spirit that I had earlier. In other words, always expanding it, as opposed to, Swamiji said, sitting down to a meal and just going, just living through the senses, and so on. And so another is to say, I feel like I might have this palgoa. But the joy that you feel is inside yourself. How do you know? Because if you're really sick, ill, and you have a fever and someone says, palgoa, you just, get it out. I can't eat it. I can't. Or if you have, whatever it is, after the 8th piece of Mysore pak, you have 8 more. It's just like, it's not so enjoyable anymore because we don't have the capacity. The Mysore pak is happy, but we aren't. We've lost the capacity to enjoy. So it proves to us that that capacity is in us. So rather than thinking I have to have that thing to enjoy, even when enjoying it, go ahead. But say, but it's still in me. And this happens not only with sense enjoyments, but also with enjoyments, for example, of even being with other people. Though we're grateful for them, we have to accept that the joy we feel in their presence comes from God, comes from us too. I say that because sometimes when those people leave, we feel great sadness, not only because of whatever, but because now we won't get that joy. But that joy was always in you. Maybe in the other person, maybe not, but always in you. Okay?
Okay, then we must always remember when we are
Always remember.
enjoying that.
Always remember as
It's
much as
only
possible.
practice, I think.
Huh?
To practice more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The
Remember.
goal is to always remember. So the first step is to try to remember once. It's and do it with something easy. Food for some people is easy, or a drink or something simple. And then it's not that you enjoy it less. You just acknowledge that. Pretend that Master served you that cup of tea. Wouldn't that be lovely? That you're having lunch with Swamiji. Isn't that nice? Or that he made it for you. Or Divine Mother. Anything. Then you can bring it into the heart. And then it becomes more devotional rather than just the senses. I must have the ladyfinger. I have to have the fried okra now. And so on. I don't know if anyone has ever said that ever in this world, but no, I'm joking. I like it sometimes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else like to comment or ask or speak? Hi, Shantakumar. Thank you for your message today, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the session, Madhuri. As usual, you always sprinkle it with your humor, keeping the lesson intact, and it's always entertaining, and learning is so good. So I just pick up 3 points from whatever we had today. There's all simple things, but we have to remember. Like you said, like Master says, you don't have to become divine. You have to remember that you came from divine or something. So that connected me really good. Like always be in this spiritual path, I used to think I should become like this or I should reach that point, but I should just remember that I came from divine or I am divine or something like that. So that took some stress off me. Okay. Okay,
Good.
I'm good. I am just in delusion or Maya or something, so I have to get back. So that is one. And the second point, when you said here, the Jnana Avatar says that heart is more important. It's not the Prema Avatar, it's the Jnana Avatar who says love of heart is more important. So the way you said it stick to my mind.
I'm glad.
So yeah, so that is one. And food, obviously, so far my knowledge is like it is like vegetarian. Man is a vegetarian. The same things I have heard, like how our genes are designed and everything. But when you said fruit, I know of a fruit eating thing. So I thought still one level no, we have to try hard. A year after I am going to eat fruit only. And then you interrupted. The very next line you said, Master said your system is not developed in Dwapara Yuga. So I thought, okay, very good. I have time. I can eat something else.
Yes, you have some time. I think it's about 10,000 years or something till not that long till Satya Yuga, maybe 5,000 years, yeah. So yes, you have time. Yeah, it's not right for Dwapara Yuga, but that we should still have some fruit. So yeah.
All the other points are also like too deep. So I just picked up these points which are simple and easy
I'm
to
very
remember
glad.
always.
I'm very glad. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, I think that, okay, Lakshmi?
Evening, Swamiji. I enjoyed your class today, but I enjoyed the eight meanings part that you explained. It was just very clear. I like it a lot.
I'm glad because these things sort of come up again in the next week also. More not quite the eight meannesses, but something similar is coming. So I'm glad.
Thank you for a wonderful class.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Well, I think maybe we should we call it a good night for now, except for, yes, Sharmila, the
Hello,
library.
yeah, I was just so happy to see you and so happy to listen to it. I'm just thinking, I'm so amazed every time I listen to Holy. It's like, is it from the beginning that book so much is,
Yeah,
it's
I
done in
know.
form of so many precious truth and like it is so many things like about nature, about medicine, about whatever you want. Like how it's amazing. So
Yeah,
I really enjoy these classes. Thank you so
good,
much.
good,
Yeah,
good.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaskaram.
Namaskar.
Rajat Singh,
Thank you. Thank
yeah.
sir.
Shall I say something?
Please,
Are you able to hear me?
I am.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you. You have continuously talking for the past almost from 7:30 onwards. You took the other class 7:30 to 8 o'clock, then from 8 to now. It's almost 2 hours. You've got a lot of energy. Thank you for that. And in fact, I didn't have that book. I would like to get one. It will be more helpful for me. And your explanation was excellent. And if I had the book, it would have been very helpful to me. I will get it when I come to Chennai or so.
Very good. You can also get it on Amazon. They have the digital version, the Kindle version for like, 60 rupees. Huh?
29, G. 29.
39 rupee. Oh, I'm sorry.
29.
Okay. So it's pretty affordable. So if you have, you can get the Kindle app on your phone, and then you can just get it that way. So anyway, that's a short-term solution. But anyway, thank you for what you shared. I appreciate it. Okay, everybody. Well, I think that.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you. I
Fantastic. It
think
was fantastic. Like the food thing. So they say the food that you eat make you what you are, right?
it has been said. It's very true. You are what you
Yes.
eat.
You
Well,
are what you eat.
big.
And that pretty much sums us. Whenever you eat carnivores, non-vegetarian earlier days, you used to have that sort of rush in blood, and you become so wild, and anger comes in. But when nowadays, given up on non-vegetarian and sattvic food, vegetarian, peace and calmness prevails all over. So it's a marked shift, as you said. Food has an impact.
I'm so
Food does
glad.
have an impact.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've observed that.
And this book, is there anything that he has not covered at all?
It's hard to say
He
because the truths
he
are
has
so
covered
central. Exactly. They reach
everything,
out to everything. It's true.
everything, well researched, well, it's perfect logic. It makes sense and it clears many doubts, many things, the misconceptions that we had about certain things. It clears away all the things. Man, he's amazing. No wonder he's our guru. Thank you for probably if I have read the book, I wouldn't have enjoyed this. But the way you put across, the way the sense of humor is amazing. It's amazing. Uh, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. We're very fortunate to have Master and Sri Yukteswar with us as our gurus, definitely. And it's interesting too because sometimes this is not speaking to you or to your point, but sometimes people make a big thing about vegetarianism or looking down on people who are non-vegetarian or non-vegetarians themselves, at least in India where there is a strong push for vegetarianism also, will feel a guilt among themselves. And that's why it's fun that then Sri Yukteswar lists the meannesses of the heart to avoid condemnation of others and also shame. So it balances nicely with the vegetarian topic before. So.
And one more thing is about the 8 factors of bondage. 8 factors of bondage. Is it easy to practice all those eight? One can be absolved of all the 8 factors. Can anyone?
Definitely, but I would say do it one at a time. In other words, some of these will naturally go away as you meditate. As you meditate, you get a largeness of heart automatically for all the reasons he says, if you do it in tune with a guru and with right attitude. And then your heart, the largeness of your heart starts to feel pinched by these meannesses of the heart. And so you naturally avoid them. But then we will have something that's a deeper tendency or whatever, and so maybe focus on that one rather than trying to take on all 8 at once.
One by one baby step.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next class.
Very good.
Hope
Thank
everything's
you.
fine with you.
Very fine. Thank you. Nice to hear from you. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, even our Zoom account is about to kick us off because we've been on so long. I'm joking, it actually isn't. But once we cross 10 o'clock, I am concerned about sort of whether it's a human rights violation or something to keep you on this long. So I'm going to exit now, but thank you all for being here. Thank you for having your cameras on. I can't tell you what a joy it is to see you all, to see your faces, to be connected. We miss you very much, the contact, and this is the best thing, the TV I'm looking at is the best thing we can get for that. In right now, and we look forward to more times of connection that are coming up, not only this weekend, but also in the Kriya initiation for those of you attending that. There are other gatherings we're going to have planned and so on. So anyway, it's nice to wrap up this class, and sorry for the long delay, but nice that we could get back to it. So thank you again and good night.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujata. Thank you all. Good night.